Back in 1962, when Frank Drake became the first fullback to score a try in an Australia-Great Britain Test match, a 16-year-old girl sat in the members' enclosure at the Sydney Cricket Ground in awe of the man's great talents. 26 years later, the couple and their 5 daughters have seen that try scored again. For the 5 girls, it was their first glimpse of their magic dad on film, and for Frank Drake and his wife Jan, it was the second time, but their first look at the television footage of that memorable moment. Well, Frank, you've just seen that try on television for the first time. Your family, in fact, have seen it for the very first time. Does it still feel as good 26 years later?
Well, Tony, to see it for the first time, yes, it was tremendous to bring back memories, not only of that game, but probably it's brought me memories of the whole my career, and it was a great thrill to see it for the first time.
Well, it created history, of course. It made you the first fullback to score a try in an Australia-Great Britain Test match. At the time, was the significance there for you?
Well, I didn't realise straight away, but later on I was informed of it. So at that time it did, because it put me in the record books, I suppose, and it's a great thrill.
In fact, that was a fairly history-making Test series against Great Britain. They say one of the greatest Great Britain sides to come out here. They gave Australia a nice old bath. You fellas got up to win that last Test match by the odd point, and there were some incidents in there that weren't all that savoury.
Oh yes, well, when you have a Test match in those days, the players played up to it, but I would say that that was probably the most even series that probably Australia and Great Britain have ever played. If you take out the first Test, the other 2 Tests there was only 2 points in one and 1 point in the other, and we let them get away in the first Test, unfortunately.
Frank, getting back to that film, you in fact were on the inside of Arthur Summers when he passed the ball on the outside to Kenny Irvine. Was it forward?
Well, I was onside. Kenny was slightly forward, yes.
He got a little start.
He did, yeah.
In fact, that was the second Test that you played for Australia, but you had a chance earlier. You were selected in Australian 15 back in 1960, 2 years earlier. Didn't get on the field because in those days there weren't replacements. And in fact, even though you're in that final 15, didn't make the World Cup squad to go to England.
No, Tony. Unfortunately, at that time, I thought I would make it. I was in the first 15 with only a month or so to go before the team was selected. But I went back to Toowoomba and played in the Blimba Cup game, and I believe in that game against Brisbane, I scored 3 tries, and I believe at that time I was probably the first fullback ever to score 3 tries in a first-class game. But on the Sunday I went back to the club side, and I scored 3 tries in the first half, so I'd scored 6 tries in 1.5 games. Unfortunately, in the second half, I put a bone through my shoulder and ended up in the Toowoomba hospital, and unfortunately that ruined my chances of going to England in that series.
Well, you didn't go to England, but you did go to New Zealand the next year, and you and your rival of that time, Don Parrish, tossed up for the first Test. He in fact played in that first Test and scored the first try by a fullback in a Test match.
Yes, that's right. Don did. It was a toss-up in the game. I got the second Test. Went close to scoring, but then of course I made it when I came back to Australia the next year and against Great Britain.
Your representative career, in fact, Frank, started while you were at Toowoomba, but you were initially from Sydney. You were a Balmain boy.
Yes, I'm originally from Balmain. I played the junior football down there. I was understudy to Keith Barnes, of course, and it looked like there was going to be a long series of playing either second grade as a fullback, or possibly I was also playing on the wing. So I felt at that time that I felt that I'd like to play fullback, and made the choice to move away.
Why Toowoomba?
Well, at that time there was the residential qualifications in Sydney, and you could only play that in that particular district which you lived. At the time there was 2 Christian brothers that taught me in Sydney that were teaching in Toowoomba. I had kept in touch with them over the years, and they recommended Toowoomba. They also recommended Duncan Thompson's probably one of the best coaches around, and I made the decision to go to Toowoomba.
And your career certainly kicked on from there, but after Toowoomba you came to Brisbane, you played for South, then went back to Sydney, and did you go back to Balmain?
No, because Barnes was still there, so I went back to East, and had 1 year with East, but then I had a shocking injury. I dislocated my hip. I don't know whether too many other footballers have done it, but it put me out of the game for about 12 months, and actually the doctor had told me to give it away forever.
But you didn't? You came back and you had one final fling at Brothers?
I came back and I did. I felt good, Unfortunately, though, I kept breaking down that year, but I did play in the final. I unfortunately broke down. My hamstring gave way completely for the grand final and I wasn't able to make it.
And you were somewhat of an innovator as well, Frank. We spoke earlier about you scoring the first try in an Australia-Great Britain Test match, but I believe you were the first player ever to wear coloured boots.
Yes, in 1958, as a matter of fact, I wore them because I was picked to play against St George in the final in 1958, and we were sitting in the dressing shed ready to go on, and I had these white boots, the cut-down boots as a matter of fact, and they were actually running shoes that had sprigs on them. And the then Secretary of the Australian Rugby League came up to me and said, "Son, you can't wear those boots, they're not the right colour." And I said, "Well, I haven't brought any others with me." And I actually played in those boots, but I'm not sure that I won favours from officialdom.
And another first for you, you were involved in the very first rugby league game to be televised in Sydney.
Yes, in 1958 also, television was coming in then, but at the time they'd only give us 10 minutes in each half, mainly because the rugby league at the time, the powers that be, thought that the game would be lost and they wouldn't allow any more. There was only one camera at one end of the field, and unfortunately we all wanted to get on the TV, and the game seemed to be played at that end of the field.
Well, talking about TV, I suppose with 5 daughters in your family that your rugby league career, since you gave it away, or your interest in the game has probably been just on TV, just watching the game.
Yes, it didn't help. Probably with sons I may have taken a greater interest. I really wasn't interested in coaching, so yes, I know all about the game, and there's a lot of people still remind me of it. A lot of people tell me a lot of things that's going on, even if I'm not particularly interested myself. So it's in the blood, of course, and you never lose that.
You must enjoy, though, particularly watching the running fullback, the Gary Jackson, the Gary Belchers that we have playing the game today.
Yes, actually, I'd say Don Parrish and I took over from the type of play that Clive Churchill innovated, but Clive Churchill used to come up into the back line where we ran off players, because Parrish in his early days was a winger too, you know. And at the time, I think Parrish and myself, we actually really brought to fruition this attacking play. I think the greatest player that exploited our game, plus the style that Churchill first innovated, was Graham Eadie. I suppose he would probably be my model fullback.
Yeah, and of course Graham Eadie is going to be on display in the Challenge Cup final in a couple of weeks' time, so you'll enjoy watching that.
That's right.
In fact, tomorrow night Graham Eadie will be on display here on TVO when Halifax take on Wigan in the Wembley Cup final. And Frank Drake, like thousands of other Queenslanders, will be watching.